as far as mending that relationship, I told myself it was too late. You know, I wasn't gonna have anything with that relationship with my father. Like yeah, like I just so much like how am I going to get those years back? Like it's impossible.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Light It Up podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Taylor. With us, we have Rafael.
Hello.
And we have Jonathon Guerrero, our guest today.
Hey guys.
So I met Jonathon, I'd say, around 2021, so about 2 years ago, at a youth rally his father was having, Pastor Francisco, which is actually, he's going to be on in the next few episodes. So I had the opportunity to hear his testimony. It was a powerful testimony. A lot of things happened. He became a Marine in the process, and that alone was crazy. But the general theme of his testimony and what we're going to be talking about is the prodigal son. So there was a time in Jonathon's life where he was not serving God, and he got back, he got saved again, and he's going to be talking about that very, very similar to the prodigal son. So he wanted to talk about that, share his testimony. So we encourage you to stay tuned because this may be a 2-part episode. So this Saturday, March 11th, we will be releasing this episode, and if we will most likely have a part 2. So March 18th, stay tuned for that. It'll come out next Saturday. And so without further ado, let's get started. Jonathon's just gonna start off towards the beginning of his testimony, and we're gonna ask questions as he goes. So Jonathon, why don't you take it away?
Yes. So, we were speaking earlier. To give some context, I want to start pretty early on. I'm not going to go too detailed into certain things, but I think, just giving a general basis of how my life started, basically would almost conclude to where my life is now. So, right now I'm 28 years old. I was born 94. The time when the earliest I can remember, I was in a broken home, that's not really necessarily like, it wasn't my fault, it's just, that's my earliest really memories, as you're gonna speak to my father later on, and he may be able to give his point of view in that area. But when I was born, it was almost on the same time that he got involved with the church. He got involved with God, and as soon as that happened, God has been a part of my life since the day I was born. If some point or another, my grandfather is actually a preacher. He's a pastor for the door, Pastor Herman Gastelum. So I mean, like, even before my father was, God, I had that inheritance, but unfortunately, very early on, I didn't understand or I didn't appreciate that inheritance. Growing up as a PK, the difficult part about it was, at the time, I was going back and forth with mom and dad, and what caused the most, I guess, problems in my life was that 2 different parents resulted in 2 different lives. I would go with my dad, and it was all about, he was, the earliest memory I have of him, he was on fire for God. He was moving. I would be at outreach, just at be a prayer, like a 5-year-old me would be at prayer. I mean, I'd be sleeping, but while he'd be at prayer, and the only thing was, when I would go to my mom's, there was no church. There was none of that. She wasn't saved. So I had this really weird idea of what life, I saw just 2 aspects of it, of where when I was younger, my father lived in a brother's home for a while, and I would spend the weekend with him in those area places, and I was around men that were serving God, and just had that fire, and really, really wanted to do things for him, and then during the week I'd be with my mom, and God wasn't in the household anymore. So growing up was very struggling with me. Um,
So,
Go
oh,
ahead.
I'm gonna just wanted to ask. So, your parents were separated, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I believe they got married. I don't even remember that happening. Yeah, from my earliest memories, they were already separated.
So,
And
how you were kind of around? How old were you?
so my dad got saved. I want to say it was '94. I was born. I was 4 years old when my father had entered into the church, and I want to say that's probably about the same time my parents might have separated.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you kind of grew up with going in between houses and between parents.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So what was kind of, because a lot of church kids, a lot of pastors' kids like me, we never experience, having to go between parents and that. So currently you're a PK, you're a pastor's kid,
Yeah.
but when you were just a church kid, you had to experience two different lives and two different homes. So how was that mentally, and especially very young? How what was your thought process? Was there a lot of rejection, or how did that go for you?
Well, there was nothing for me to compare it to, so it just felt like life.
Mm,
It wasn't like I was really hitting like different areas where I'm like, to be honest with you, I thought that's how everyone's life was going. That or their parents were separated. It wasn't until I became a little more mature, a little older. I wouldn't say mature, but a little more older and a little more understanding of things that I started to realize, like, oh wait, like not everyone's parents are separated. Not everyone's parents are bouncing back and forth. Um, and but to be honest with you, it was like when I was in the church, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time. I just didn't know why we were doing it. Really, I really had
yeah,
no really understanding. I just enjoyed the outreaches. I knew the brothers and the sisters, they loved me. They cared for
yeah,
me. And it was like I had that second family. And I just remember when I would come back to my mom's, I was like, "Where's this other family at? Like, why aren't we hanging out with them? Why are we only doing this on certain days?"
mm,
There was fights between my parents. You know, um, Obviously my father had a mindset of like it's like he wasn't there just kind of to leave me on the in the dirt. But the biggest issue is that living with my mom all throughout the week. I I love my mom. I love her to death, and what her words said implanted into me. So whether or not that was good or bad about the church or about my dad, like it just it stuck to me. And I remember growing up and just having this fear really developing me to my father. Because I was living with someone who didn't like him, and I was trying to understand this fear, but over time I let it almost just become something that stayed in me every time he'd come present into my life. I didn't know why I was afraid of this person all of a sudden. I didn't know why. I didn't enjoy going to what's it called to the outreaches, to the prayers, to all that stuff. I just remember when it was me and him, like it was really hard for me to feel safe, to feel secure because of just as a child, like you're trusting your parents. You're trusting whatever your mom or your dad is telling you is the truth. They can tell you that the moon is made out of cheese and you'll believe them. Like
yeah,
so. When my mom is telling me these things, what am I doing? I'm believing in it.
mm,
I don't want to tell. I don't want to. I have. I don't want to tell. I don't want to say at the time my mom's a liar because I don't even understand what a liar is. A lot of that age, there's no such thing as lies. It's just everything's the truth. Everything's the truth. Like and so that developed in me, and it became my character, growing up. Like, so eventually I stopped wanting to go see my dad. I stopped wanting to interact with him. You know, he had gotten married pretty early on. Um, after he was like 24, I think, when he got saved, and then 27 is when he got married. He might tell you. I don't know if that's for sure, but but when that happened, that's when it really affected me. That's when I started, because my mom, it's not, this is not a bashing on my mom kind of thing. This is just what I was, the truths that I was told, or the lies that I was told, that really
Hmm.
played into this, to my life, and she just said one thing, and it was like, if your father cared for you, he wouldn't have tried to start a new family. And I took that
Mm.
to heart. I took it to heart. I'm looking at my dad, and he got married. I'm like telling myself, why isn't he trying to fix what he has? And like I said, the problem is I didn't want to try to investigate. I didn't want to ask. I just held on to this bitterness, to this hate in my heart. That really developed from just one simple, like, actions, thought. And I would frequently, I mean, from the ages, from when I was born to 18, I would have very, very off and on interaction with him. Um, but there was a period, I believe, I want to say when I was 12 or 13 years old, where my mother, we had moved out of San Jose into
Okay.
Modesto. Now, during that time was when the world really took a hold of me, you know, like, the world really took all those desires, all those things. I was no longer going to church anymore. And at the time, growing up, I really thought, like, it was pointless.
So, um, so would you say when you kind of stopped having that kind of interaction with your father is when you kind of started drifting away, and also because of the situation, because you moved, but also with less interactions with your father, do you think that kind of led you towards the just kind of the opposite direction, and obviously not being in church, that'll have a huge effect on someone's life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what before me moving, I wanted less interaction with him, because every time, for some reason, for me, I would go visit him, and it would just be church. It would just be church, 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 church. And I'd always tell my mom, like, my mom would ask me, "So what'd you do with that?" I'm like, "Oh, we went outreach." It's like, "You guys just went to church?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, we just went outreach, we had church, we went to prayer, like, the same weekend." And I remember just being told, like, "Why don't you guys do anything else?" And I thought the same thing, like, why can't we do something else? Why does it always have to be church when I'm visiting him? And I like, really, that consumed me, where I told myself, "Oh, like, he really doesn't care about spending time with me. It's
Mm.
just about the church. It's about God." Um, and I'll come back to that later on.
So my question was, so when exactly did you get saved? Because did you have any kind of like understand? I know you at a young age you went to church and all that. Did
Mhm.
you like probably this? Did you understand like how do I phrase this? Like as a God, did you have like a personal relationship at a younger age, or did you like later on in your life afterwards you finally had that personal relationship?
I mean, I've had a relationship with him. I've never not believed in God. When I was younger, the relationship I had with him was very resentful, because it wasn't my relationship with God. It was my father's relationship with God that I had a problem with. You
Mm.
know, because he would tell me about him very early on in my age. My dad never was not, like, the one. I mean, you guys know my dad. Like, he's not the one to kind of stray away. He was very upfront with me, very blunt with me, and sometimes as a kid, that really, it might have went over my head, but sometimes it'd be like, whoa, like, who is this God that this guy my dad is talking about? Like, this God seems serious. Really, because my dad he knew. I mean, he knew exactly like what the world was dangling in front of me, and he was trying to protect me the best way he could. The problem was is that, you know, this God that my dad kept talking about. For me, it felt like it was that was taking God was taking me away from my father, because my dad wanted to serve God, but I just wanted to spend time with my dad, you know. And every time we would go, we go together. Sometimes, yeah, he would take me and have those personal moments. But the majority of the time, you know, my father was on fire. He forgot he was serving God. He took me with him, you know, and I didn't see that moments where just going with him to outreach, for some reason, wasn't enough for me, you know. So I've always had a relationship. It wasn't until later on in my life where it became, you know, more personal relationship. You know,
Yeah.
God has always been in my life, and he's always been kind of hovered over me when I was really younger, where I felt like he was just a, you know, sometimes a pain to me, you know, sometimes something that I really didn't want to deal with. It just, yeah, like it was, I gained more understanding of who he was until I got saved. Before I got saved, God very much for me was someone who, you know, was who was altered, like looking at me with like a smug eye, like he didn't like me for some reason. That was my point of view when I was younger. You
I
know.
think this is funny how you were saying that your testimony and all that, and like how my life is almost exactly as you, but flipped. I'm serving God, and both of my parents aren't. They're
Mhm.
always, why you always at church? Why you always do this and that? And
Yeah.
it's just like I don't know why I don't know why I'm saying it, but it's just like I know how your father, not necessarily how your father felt, but I know how it was always at church, always like you feel like that
Yeah.
separation.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, trust me. I mean, even now, like, I mean, I don't want to stray away from the my testimony, but even now, I'm on that same boat where I'm dealing with people that in my life, or people, my coworkers, you know, they're really confused, or really, you know, I've just the simplest words I've been able to tell you or even heard was, no one will understand until they understand. Like, no one's gonna know unless they are doing the same thing you're doing. You know, like, you know, someone's not gonna know what it's like to get saved until they get saved. Like, no one's, you know, to have that relationship. But yeah.
Yeah, and the same is true for not only PKs, but I would say more missionary kids.
Hmm.
So, I mean, they kind of just have to go with their parents to,
Yeah.
China or whatever it might be. They have to go because that's and it's their parents' decision, right? That's tough. I mean, I've
Yeah.
never been out of America, but it's different. A lot of countries are different,
Yeah.
and especially in countries where it's hard to spread the gospel, it's going to be hard growing up there.
Yeah.
To see your parents consumed by ministry, I think is a hard thing to comprehend for younger kids, just because, you know, it's just hard because you're not necessarily old enough to understand, but there are, supernatural experiences that happen to people when they're younger, but still, it's just, I feel like a lot of kids can be in that position, just like my parents are consumed by ministry, and it seems as if, you know, they don't seem to pay attention to me, which is what I believe. This is what I've heard before, from other people, and I believe this is the same thing you're feeling in
Oh yeah.
growing up.
Yeah.
So I want you to continue. So right, so you moved, and then
So
you.
I moved, and through those years, I was in Modesto for, I want to say, from middle school to high school, my junior year. In that time, I totally felt free. Like, I totally was like, oh, I don't know how to go to church anymore. You know, like I think every other month or every month or so for the first year or two, I would go see my dad on the weekends, and we'd commute. And then there was a point where it just was nada. Like, I didn't see him anymore. You know, and for me, like, I didn't see that as a bad. I was like, the problem was is that I wanted to live that life because I was in this rebellious. I mean, a lot of teenagers go through that phase, just this rebellious phase, you know. And um, but it seemed like things were just more in front of me than they really should have been. But like I said, the devil he wants everyone, you know, and he's not like the devil sees someone more special, but you know, well now I know, you know, God had a destiny for me, and the devil wanted to strip that away, and so, and you know, at the time it didn't really feel like I was being attacked, but I did. That bitterness and that hate never left me from my father. Like it stuck there and it just grew and it festered into something even more toxic, you know, because I didn't want anything to do with my dad, but the fact that I felt like he wasn't making an effort, you know, or wasn't really trying to reach out to me, that would I just used that to more to play against, you know, him. And as far as with the prodigal son, you know, there's that moment where, you know, the son asks, like, I want my inheritance and I want to leave, you know. And it's funny, you know, it's like I'm not saying this is that moment, but that's that point where I'm like, I don't want anything to do with you. You
Hmm.
know, I want to move, I want to go, you know, I'm growing up. I really want to like see this place, you know. Um, and in that time though, I struggled a lot though, because, you know, I had a father, I had a man, my stepfather came into my life obviously early, very early on. But even for me, I lost the sight of what authority was and you know of what a father could have done because I gave him problems just as much. You know, I would tell him, you know, hey, you're not my real dad, even though I didn't want to make amends with my real father. You know, and I remember just during those years, I really, really just avoided the talk or the thought of God. You know, and but he was always there. He would always linger, and it was funny because even my mom, when I would get too riled up, she would always use him as like she's like, you know, like I'm gonna tell your father, like, you know, and I'd be like, hey, like, because I still, like I said, that fear that was instilled in me when I was younger really just resonated, you know, to when I was like almost throughout my life, you know. So yeah, I'm going through these years, and in this time, life is good, life is easy. Yeah, I'm just a normal, simple teenager, but this father figure, even God Himself, I used to tell myself like, I don't want to be anything like my dad. I don't even want to. If I'm going to be a father one day, I'm going to treat my kids with respect. I'm going to, I'm going to spend time with them. I'm telling myself these things, and I would break down sometimes because I'm just like, why don't I have it? Why can't I have a dad? Like, why can't I be doing those things with my dad? You know, like I get all worked up. I'm like, I know I'm not going to do this and do that, and then I would start crying like a baby. I'm like, I just want my dad, you know, and you know, but I was so prideful, so like just stubborn that I like it was me, you know. At the end of this, you know, it was my biggest enemy at the time was myself, you know,
Bro, I
and
just feel like we're just talking about fathers now, but like being fatherless and all that. Not necessarily being father, but like having that empty void of the father. Because
yeah,
exact same thing. I don't know if you know my testimony, but my dad was an alcoholic. At
yeah,
the age of 10, my parents separated, and the same day you said, like, I'm never gonna be like my dad, and it's just cut deep on into me, like, because like one thing I noticed that like we can't see our fathers like as God. We can't like preach
yeah,
them. Oh, this is what a man's supposed to be. Because sometimes they're not perfect. They're not gonna be this right person. But a scripture, just I know this is off topic, but there's a scripture that comes to mind that Jesus is basically saying that God is the father, the fatherless.
yeah.
And I just want to say that, just like, because
Okay.
I just feel like if we're going off, like, not going off topic, but talking about like fathers and all that.
Well, but in the reason why I bring that because this really played into this whole idea, right? I mean, like you say, you mentioned with your father being alcoholic. The problem that I had is I'm telling you with my unselfishness, my bitterness, my pride, is that I had a father who was serving God, and and I would tell myself these things like he never was making an effort when he would lie to me. He didn't really care for me. If he loved me, he wouldn't have started a new. I created these lies, man. I created these lies and these ideas in my head just to cope with the idea that there was no, that man was not doing those things. He was not drinking. He was not fornicating with other women. He was not, going out in the town. He was serving God from the day I was born. My problem was I let the devil enter into my mind and take over those thoughts. And the problem is with a lot of ourselves and individuals, like PKs, not PKs, is the people we want to trust the most, the people we love.
Yeah.
Your family. When it comes to when it's your own flesh and blood and they're telling you these things, you want to believe them. You don't want to just all of a sudden just discern their truths or their facts. And so the thing is, people I love are telling me lies about this person, you know, and I'm eating it up. But and it's like I'm taking time bomb at this point. Everything is just coming into play. And so it's surely but slowly it's turning me against God. It's not like at this time I know God is real, but now it's like it's just turning me against Him. Go
So,
ahead.
Rafael, were you gonna say something?
So, I have a question. I know this is straight out of left field, but so when exactly did you join the Marines?
Well, I was just about to say
Yeah. Well,
so kind of you just moved. You're probably early teens, late teens, correct?
yes. Yeah.
So then,
Up until like junior year, so 17, 16 years old.
okay. So we're obviously trying to get to the part where you join the Marines,
Yeah.
but so I just before we get into that, was as growing up as a teenager, kind of separated from your dad, did you ever get into drugs or anything bad? Would you say? The more you got in, the more you, or the less you got into church, did you get more into drugs and all that?
So it was the funny thing is that like being on their household, like my mom, I was a little rebel and just kind of a troublemaker, but I held on to some convictions early on in my age. Like because the church was still very relevant. Like it wasn't like I was like, so I was still afraid of certain disciplinary action, and so I think obviously the most I did when I was a teenager was I had like a couple beers. I think when I was like
Mm,
16 or 17 years old, I mean I was with friends, and peer pressure is so was so there,
powerful.
yeah, and I mean I'm not gonna go into like the whole thing, but I friends that were like inviting me to their house, and you just have all these people that you trust and you care for all your friends and they're telling you like you drink this beer, like have a good time, like yeah, you don't hesitate. I mean, as much as what some of us really want to be like, oh, I struggle, I thought no, it's like you don't hesitate. Like I'm not, I didn't hesitate. I was like, I'm with people I know. I'm with people who like you, like didn't care about me. But I mean, but the funny thing was, it wasn't that really didn't happen until we get into the military. Like
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
So then,
and
so
so
then,
yeah, so yeah,
so then, let's go into that portion of your testimony. So,
okay.
did you go to the military right when you turned 18, or
So yeah, it was my high school year. I moved back to San Jose, and this is actually when I started coming back to my father's church.
okay?
Um, I joined in the youth on fire there, and I was going to church regularly. I really thought, sorry, I wanted to in some way mend that relationship because in the back of my head I knew I was going to leave.
So wait, did you get saved at this point, or were you just going to church?
I mean, I'll tell you, I responded to the altar calls.
Okay.
You know, I responded to the altar calls. I knew, but to be honest with you, it was doing it for the sake of that person seeing me go up there,
Hmm.
not for the sake of myself. I didn't respond to those altar calls because I felt something. It was just like, okay, I don't want this person to keep pestering me about getting saved. So I'm going to go to the altar call. They're going to see me go to the altar call, and they're going to leave me alone about it. And that was it. Yeah.
So you were essentially playing the church game,
Yeah, it
while
was
mending the relationship with your father.
yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't two-faced about it. I mean, I knew I was enjoying the going to church, you know. I was enjoying the youth on fires, you know. Like I was in some partially I had that was building that relationship with my father again, you know, and it was just it was a little difficult because it you know, it was really hard. I've never it was at the time it was like the you know, I'm a whole different person, you know, before when he saw me leave, you know. And like I said, I was just playing that part because I just didn't want problems. I didn't want to like fight or argue about it, you know. And yeah, like literally we responded to altar calls because I didn't want someone to come up to me and ask if I was saved. Because I didn't want it to I didn't like, you know, they would see right through me if they had that conversation, you know. Um, but in that time, I think in the middle of the school year, recruiter came up to me and he looked exactly like how I wanted to look, you know, in the future. And he's like, "You want to join?" And I'm like, "Yeah," you know. And when I made that decision, I made that decision with so much like bitterness and anger. Like I wanted to leave my family. I didn't want anything to do with anyone. I was like, maybe I'll find the meaning to myself and what I want to do if I join the military, you know. And he sold it well, like it was like go and see the world and being by yourself, being a man, you know. And I'm like, I want to be a man, you know. I want to start this journey. The thing that's funny is I remember telling my mom for the first time I was going to join. She didn't talk to me for a week, you
And
know. And even my father needed convincing, you know, like he needed that. But I knew if I when I turned 18, they were gonna have no. It wasn't gonna be no one's decision but mine to go, you know. And
so,
I
oh, continue.
no, go ahead. I'm okay.
Well, I just wanted to ask, so you had tried to mend that relationship with your father. Did that work out, or did that kind of, was there still bitterness inside of you to, or enough bitterness to not try and mend that relationship, or how did that work out?
That at that point in my life, I told myself that relationship was never going to be redeemed.
Mm.
I held it against him, and I wanted him to apologize for everything. I wanted him to come to me and be like, "Son, I'm so sorry that you know all these years he didn't, you know." And I just took that. Oh, he had some pride behind him, but it was obviously the pride was all in me, you know. And I was like, I'm not gonna get those years back. So I really don't care what happens. You know, I was really going to the church because of the youth on fire. I got to know. I mean, Pastor Isaac, Pastor Antonio, like, most of our brothers in the church I've known since we were like 16, 17 years old. You know, and I was really going for the youth on fire, like for the youth we had at that time. Like, I love being picked up, and we'd be out to 3 in the morning, bowling, whatnot. You know, but as far as mending that relationship, I told myself it was too late. You know, I wasn't gonna have anything with that relationship with my father. Like, yeah, like I just so much like how am I going to get those years back? Like, it's impossible.
So, one question: what age did you try to like how long? Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. Um, so you're saying that junior year, you were like you had the recruiter and you tried to redeem that relationship with your father.
Yeah.
When exactly did you're like, okay, this is it. We're not gonna be able to fix this. Like what, like age wise, that would be.
Well, it was like 17 to 18 years old. It was 17 when I came back, and when I went to my last year, senior year was in San Jose, so that's how I started going back to the church. I was living like like 5 minutes away from the church, and so when I started going back and forth, and it was just like he's the same guy he was almost 17 years ago. So like, yeah, I mean, it didn't take me that long to really just settle that in my head that this wasn't gonna work. It was like whatever, like it doesn't bug me. The thing is, like, I was lying to myself. I was, you don't. I'll get into that later, but it was like I'm a grown man. I'm 18 years old. I'm an adult. I don't need no dad. I've been, it's like, I've I've been fatherless for the last 18 years, so like it's pretty much like I can do another 18 years without a father. That's what I was telling myself. So yeah.
So, we know we're just about to get into the military part, so we're going to cut it off right here. So this is part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, which is going to come out next Saturday. We're going to get into Jonathon's testimony, or the rest of his testimony. He got into the Marines and some things happened, and then his redemption story. So if you haven't already, subscribe, follow us, leave a like, share, do all that. Follow us on Instagram. For anybody that was following our old account, we have made a new one. Link in the description. It is light_it_up.podcast. And check out our website for merch. Check out our link tree for all the links to everything. And we'll see you guys in the next one. God bless.
So, you hear my testimony and whatnot, and it's what it is, man. I'm not going to say, and we don't need to have that experience. We don't need to put ourselves in that situation. What I I hope was heard is that God is persistent, man. God loves you and cares for you. And he is right there in those darkest times. He is right there in this pain. And then just because you have left God, just because you think that he's not there, he's there. He remembers you. He knew you before you were made in the womb, man. The fact that we have a God in that place. I had a father. I did, and he loved me with all his heart. But I took that bitterness. And if you listen to this and you have that bitterness, you have that anger, it may not be against your father, but with your mother, your friend, anyone, but you're putting it on God. And I'm telling you, God cares for you. He loves you. And it's by his mercy and grace that you get to stand there. You get to be and you get to hold on to that bitterness. But he's calling you. And he's searching for you. Every corner, every place you can go. He does not leave your sight. So if you're here and you don't have God in your heart, or even if you know God is there, but you have rejected him, you have pushed him away, and you don't see that there's a point of self-return, I'm telling you, there's a place right now. We're going to pray, and I ask that you repeat after me. We're going to say, Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you forgive me for my sins, for my bitterness, for my anger, my hate. God, you have been there in my darkest times, in my darkest moments. You know me and you know my secrets. There is nothing hidden from you. You love me, Father, and I ask that you re-enter into my heart. You show me your love and your grace. Forgive me, Father, as we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Hopefully that went through, and understand if you're in that place, you're in that dark hole, there's a light. And God, like I said, God is waiting to open that blessing. He's waiting to see you step in that destiny. And when we do, it's all smiles, man. It's all love. It's just by his grace and his glory that God redeems, he restores, and he renews. Thank you.